just kind of a little background on me. So I both study and build social media. And this paper is all about the studying side. There's nothing about the building side here. So that's what we're going to discuss today. A little bit about me. I have a PhD and BS in computer science, but I pretend to, muck around in sociology. So my work is kind of social psychology, sociology meets computer science. So you're going to see that come out in the work that I present today. So it's a very computational perspective on a social process and a social phenomenon. So I realized after I gave more the title of this talk that finding is probably not the best word. It's more like exploring. I also, you can see that title does not have the word Twitter in it. Right? So this talk is all about email. And so I would expect that some of you probably saw the title of this talk and thought, and it kind of recalled something like this. So you see email, you think something like this. So is anybody as old as me? So this was my first experience with email. This is Pine, a lovely little email client made by UW, right?
So that's how many people here use it?
How many people have ever used Pine? One, excellent, wonderful. So they pulled Pine from my fingers like this, right?
It's not necessary to show all that junk on the graph.
That's true. Yeah. But I like this picture because it's the hacker terminal, the green on black, right? Yeah. Kind of old school social media. So, I guess I want to start by making the case for email, why email is interesting. So I think it's not immediately apparent that you would call email a social medium, but I'm going to definitely claim that it is, right? And it's one of the most interesting ones. So a few stats on email, right? So it has huge penetration, right? Like something, I've got a stat here, 92% of online adults use email, right? I don't know what the similar, Streeta, do you know what the similar statistic for Twitter is? It's got to be below 20%, right? Yeah, so right, the penetration of email is definitely the most widespread, the most successful social media technology that's ever, been on the internet, right? The talk that I'm going to present today is all about work. So it's about how this stuff is situated in the workplace. And that's because of the corpus that I'm using to look at this stuff. And email is just super central at work, right? Many of you are students, right? You may not really get to the massive amounts of email that you'll see when you take your first job. But when you take your first job, right, I saw an order of magnitude increase in the amount of email that I got after I took this professorship. So that's my little pitch, that email is a social medium. So don't forget about it. It's a little old forgotten email, but it's really rich. So where Twitter is the analog for Twitter is you're standing on stage talking to thousands of people. Email is the little cocktail party in the back of the room, right? So the dynamics are different, the structure is different. It's also longer form, right? So we'll be looking at all that stuff today. I just have to stick this in too. This is one of my favorite quotes of all time from a review of ARPANET, so the precursor to the internet. So the quote says, the goals were to promote more effective use of geographically distributed computing facilities, but everybody just used it for email. So this is about the origin of the internet, right? Email was kind of like the killer app for the early internet, right? It kind of made the internet what it is. Okay, so my talk is in two parts. So one part is about hierarchy and the other part is about gossip. The reason hierarchy is first and gossip is second is because gossip is really juicy, and if I give it to you first, you won't listen to me talk about hierarchy. So I'm going to save the juicy, scandalous parts to the end, so you'll sit with me while I talk about hierarchy. So the approach here in both of the pieces, I should say, I kind of have fun writing new talks for these things. This is based on two recent papers, so if you want more details, the stuff in the hierarchy stuff is my paper from CSCW 2012. The other one's from another paper coming out.
So we just click on the screen.
What's that?
Just click on the screen.
Yeah. I'll put up the URL later. Okay. So first I want to, motivate this by saying, what's interesting about looking at hierarchy. So in the context of work, hierarchy is, one of the main drivers behind the way we act at work, right? So my personal story for why I started this project, looking at the phrases that people use to talk to their bosses versus the people below them, was that, so I entered graduate school, right? Day 0, I got an advisor, I talked to her a certain way, and as time went on and I became more of her peer, I think I started to talk differently to her, right? So when you exit graduate school, you're supposed to be a peer of your advisor, right? And I was reflecting on my own process and thought, wow, I've really changed the way I talk to Carrie. I wonder if this is going on kind of writ large. So I think it's really interesting to think about the roles that we take on in terms of hierarchy. So you may have different roles depending on who's around, right? So if your boss is around, you talk one way, and if the people who work for you are around, you talk a different way, right? There's customary roles that people fill. Bosses ask for stuff, employees give them things, right? And that's what we're going to explore today. So one of the reasons you see, well, I mean, one of the difficulties in doing a lot of social media research is actually getting access to the data. So how do you get access to a bunch of email? And now cue the lock them. I will talk about how I have run this on my own email, and I'll talk about that. But cue the dark music. This is where the email comes from. So many of you are probably too young. Who remembers Enron? Yeah, I'm starting to feel like, right, I used Pine on a terminal, right? I might have to explain what Enron is. So the data set that I'm going to use throughout the talk is the Enron email corpus. All right, so some very enterprising, so some of you are nodding your heads, seem to know about it, probably others don't. So Enron was an energy trading company, was very successful in its day, very, was, I think Fortune, magazine called it, the company of the decade. At some point it was supposed to be like this big company, right? It completely collapsed because it was a fraudulent business, right? So the cut to the chase is that Enron's executives were manufacturing profit numbers, and the entire thing collapsed. Right? Well, after the entire thing collapsed, some very forward-looking researchers at Carnegie Mellon bought the entire email corpus, right, and made it public. So if you want to go download, I mean, don't do it during my talk, but if you want to go download, the entire email data set from Enron, you can go and do it right now. So the thing to remember here is, right, this is not just any company, right? This is Enron. It was a nasty company. It was engaging in fraudulent stuff, and we're going to have to kind of take that into account as we sample the data, massage the data, turn it into one form or another. So I'm going to try at multiple points to de-Enronify it so that we can make some claims about kind of general purpose stuff. By the way, I like questions that come in the middle of the talk, so if you have them, just...
We also like that.
All right, cool, yeah.
So, is there any corpus in Japanese? Because Japanese has
Yeah.
3 forms of each verb: to speak to superiors, to speak to equals, and to speak
Right,
to
I've heard about this. I don't know Japanese, but I've heard this story. So, as far as I'm aware, no. So these are, email is really hard to come by, right? I don't want you looking at my email, right? And that's kind of the way we treat it, right? It's just really private data, so it's hard to come by. Any other questions? You can come sit down if you want.
Yeah,
We're all friends here.
The moment of migration.
Yeah, I'll hold on. One thing I discovered when I was researching Enron is that Paul Rand, the famous logo designer, designed this logo. It's probably the one he wishes he could get back. Yeah. Okay. Many reasons, yeah. It's also not very pretty, right? Yeah. Okay, so let's talk just about the basic dimensions of this corpus, because I'm going to be using it in both projects. So it's about 500,000 messages written by 151 people over 4 years. So I think it's 1997 to 2001. So remember that this is, what would that be? 4 years before Facebook, 6.5 years before Twitter. So we're talking about a social media corpus that's pretty darn old, right? The 151 people were distributed all across the company. So we were talking about CEOs, VPs, admin staff that booked the kitchen for, events. All right. So I wanted to start off by showing you 2 email messages and see if you can guess which one is coming from the boss and which one is going to the boss. All right. So this one is, please take a look at the spreadsheets and calc the gas usage by plant and pipe in California. Mike is telling us that most of these plants, that was a misspelling, will be shutting down in the next few weeks due to credit exposure. Let's discuss the impact on sendouts. Thanks. All right, so that's email 1. Make your guess. Email 2. Thank you. The itemization was absolutely no problem, and please let me know when I can do things like that to make your job go more smoothly. I know the market got chaotic late yesterday, so I thought I'd ask in the future, is it you I should come to or real time? Thanks again for your help. All right, so which one's from the boss? And you think this one is to the boss? Why? What's giving it away? This is sycophantic. So what's sycophantic about it? I'm curious.
Well, this also leads with the demand.
This
All right.
is a message that could go to one of those essential people who has the data.
Yeah, okay, that could be too.
May I
Yeah.
correct?
Right. Mhm. Oh yeah, yeah. So that's a like, we're all in it together, but really we're not. Right.
No,
Yeah.
boss would ever say, I can, please let me know when I can do things like that to make your job go more smooth.
You should come work for me. I say that all the time to my students.
Or never say.
Yeah.
For a request to get things done, and it wasn't like, can you help me out? Like an employee requesting the boss to say, could you help me with this? It was an analysis of something that needs to get done that is going down.
Yeah. So all right, you pretty much all hit on it. So I'll get to the actual phrases that we found through analytic means, but these are the ones that are dead giveaways. So please take a look, right? Somebody said it starts with a commandment, like a call to action. Do this, right? Even though it's like nice, please take a look isn't like, stop whatever you're doing and do this, right? It's like, it's nice. And then another one that I think that we'll talk about later is let's discuss. Right? This is something bosses say all the time. Let's discuss. The other giveaways in the message going to the boss, right? No problem. I can do whatever you want. No problem at all, right? Please let me know. So anytime you need me to do stuff, just let me know. So I thought is really interesting. So I thought is a hedge, right? I don't know this to be sure. I just kind of thought it. So you make your choice, right? So I'm not committing to a course of action. I'm not committing to a decision. I'm just kind of saying, so I thought this might be true. And we'll see examples of other hedges, other hedging language that comes up. Yeah,
On the previous slide,
this one.
would you attach any importance to the spelling mistake that you made?
So I'm totally fascinated by the spelling mistake. So yeah, we did not look at this stuff, but I think it's like the next thing to do because, as I was, just kind of reading through these messages, I saw a lot more misspellings coming from bosses, which now that I graduated from being somebody's student to being somebody's advisor, this happens to me all the time now, right? I'm like, and I don't spell check, right? And so like, I'm busy, you don't have status over me, maybe I'm not gonna bother to spell check it. Like that might be the theory here.
Fine doesn't have spell check.
And you're right. Nice. So that's kind of washed out. Hopefully there are gray boxes there. So let's talk a little bit about the Enron hierarchy. So I told you about the Enron email corpus, right? Those are all of the messages that were sent among the company, amongst the employees in the company. We also had access, so the other major data set that's used in the hierarchy work is this hierarchy of job titles. So in Enron, the CEO and the presidents were at the same level. We got this from another piece of work, so we're just appropriating this. You've got vice presidents and directors on the next level. In-house lawyers are just below them. Managers and traders are on the same level. Specialists and analysts are on the same level. And employees are at the bottom. So everybody, of those 151 employees, we had job titles associated with them. So we knew that, in our little job title database, it says Jeff Skilling, CEO. And it says Martha, Smith, employee, right? And so for any message, we're able to know where does it originate in the hierarchy and who's the recipient. So is it going up the hierarchy? Is it going down the hierarchy? Is it staying at the same level? So that's our primary unit of analysis here. Is we're looking at these emails and we're trying to figure out, is it going up the chain, down the chain, or staying laterally? Okay.
So you don't have boss-employee relationships. You just have.
That's right. That's right. So I don't know direct reporting relationships. So like, Moore could be my boss, but I wouldn't know that. I would just know that he's above him, or above me in the hierarchy, right? Although you would presume, I think, that there's more traffic between people who directly report to one another. I mean, that's my assumption, I guess.
Yeah, I guess maybe extracted, but you'll also be restricted to this.
Yeah, that's right.
I don't know if you could, given the social network, that you could overlap in there as well.
Say more. I'm not sure I understand.
You would assume that there's a little bit more reporting, email between people who directly report to each other.
That's my assumption, yeah.
But you also have people who are friends who are emailing.
That's right. So it would be hard to
it's
extract.
your argument.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Well, you could, the direct reports would have different email content versus just going out emails at the same time. So you use content.
Yeah, that could be. That could be.
Yeah, but we're talking about link to link right now without the.
Yeah. Any questions about this? Yeah.
Actually, going back 5 slides or so.
Hey, that's not fair.
So 150 people like this, and you had a quick calculation resulted in about 2 or 3 messages per person per day, which
Is that about
low,
right?
so
It was 1997. Right. I have a. It is. I have a histogram somewhere of like and it is skewed, just like every other social data source. You would imagine it is skewed.
Also, related to that,
Yeah.
how long were the emails? Were emails used as more reporting functions, or were they quick little questions in a...
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think I have any statistics on the average length of the messages. Or I might, but I didn't put them in the paper. I could dig them up for you, though, afterward.
So it wasn't, but it
Hey,
wasn't
Charlie.
150 people from 97 to 2001, right? The company was growing throughout that period.
The email, that's right. So it's not the entire company. So Enron was bigger than this. I'm not exactly sure why some people's email was left out. That's a good question. I'm not sure.
You said we were around thousands of employees.
Yeah.
These are the people who were being investigated. Look, in 4 years, people got promoted. And the thing I'm most curious about
That's a good question, yeah.
if you actually have the chart of names and levels by year,
Yeah.
can you predict which people would get promoted?
Oh, so man, this is my holy grail. I actually pitched that project exactly to IBM Research. Yeah, we couldn't get that data. But you bring up an interesting confound, right? Which is that, like, my data set has names mapped to positions at one point in time. So, right. So I don't have the dynamic processes of So there's going to be some noise and some slop in there.
What time that
That was at the end. So as the positions they held when the company collapsed.
presumably at least, well, not so, but there's some relativeness that existed. But it's not like
That's right, that's
people
right.
reported up to you and not for
Like it probably wouldn't be true that you would see these kinds of things, right? So like if I got promoted, my boss probably did too, right?
Did the emails have signatures? So you look at the
Some of them do. We did our best to get around those, but that wasn't like a primary goal. And actually, some of the signature information leaked into the analysis. I'll show you where the kind of like wrinkles in this analysis. All right, so let me talk about the method, maybe rather quickly, so I can get to the juicy parts. So I'm going to walk through each of these steps. So there's like 10 steps that we go through to filter stuff. So first we start with every Enron email message, right? So that's easy. So then we look to see if it happened before May 2001. And so the rationale behind this was that, so we reviewed a history of Enron. This is like a Times infographic that kind of encapsulates it. And the idea was that, well, the flagship executives of the company ran Enron into the ground, right? And at a certain point, that information became public and the company hadn't actually collapsed yet, right? It was like you knew that your CFO had misreported tons of information to the SEC and you still had to go to work and talk to him, right? And so the idea was, let's try to pick a time where none of that stuff was public. And so May 2001 is like kind of like the watershed moment when a lot of that stuff starts coming out. And so the idea was, before May 2001, people are probably acting the way they do toward their coworkers in just about every other company. That's the assumption here. Maybe not so much after May 2001. Okay, so here's a complicating factor. So when you actually dig into the data, yeah.
Just quickly, so
Sure.
after May 2001, would it be like the understanding that these emails might go public? Like, we're going to get sued? Like,
Well, yeah, we saw.
people change their behavior once they do that?
So-
All blow up in their faces?
Yeah, so I actually looked at some of the words that, like, you know, one of the ways you look at topics like rising or falling through time, one of the words you absolutely see is rise after May 2001 is sue, bankruptcy, trouble, right? Screwed. Oh yeah, actually there are swear words in this talk, so if that offends you, cover your eyes when I tell you to. It's just part of the data, so. All right, so one of the complicating issues here is that, so email messages don't just go up or down the hierarchy, right? Like if I'm a lawyer, I could write to a VP and CC a trader, right? That's a problem for us because we want to look at language as it signals hierarchy, so we're just going to restrict our analysis to messages where we can clearly say something's going up or down. So that's all I'm going to say about that. We remove the reply text, right? That's just basic. Lowercase everything, so capitalization, we're not going to look at that. We're going to remove stop words. So stop words in the natural language processing community is just really common words like at and the and of, right? We're not going to look at that stuff. And then our unit of analysis here, the phrases we're going to look at are called unibi and trigrams. So that's every unigram is a word, bigram is a two-word phrase, trigram is a three-word phrase. Okay, so in order for it to be considered by us, the phrase had to appear in at least 10 messages. The idea being that we don't really want uncommon, weird language to pop up. We want this to be as generalizable as possible. The phrase also has to be said by at least 3 people. The idea being there that, like, let's say I'm the trader and you're my admin, and I use a certain catchphrase to always talk to you. Well, I don't want that to uniquely identify the relationship, so we got to have 3 people. This was the hardest part. So I did all this, right, and looked at the phrases that it generated, and lots of them looked very specific to Enron. Things like gas market, energy prices, stuff like that. So we had 2 people, me and this other person in my lab, go through the list, and anytime any phrase was looked suspicious, like it was specific to Enron, we killed it. Okay. And so at that point, we come up with about 7,200 total unique phrases. That was a lot of work. It went down from like 11,000 to about 7,000. So we killed about 4,000 words and phrases by hand. Yeah.
Could you have not looked at noun phrases to sort of get around this problem?
You said noun phrases?
Not looked at noun phrases and looked more at like words.
Oh, so do like a part of speech tagging kind of thing?
Right,
Yeah.
Hierarchy sort of is more prominent in the verb, the action verb.
Maybe. Yeah. I mean, that's an interesting approach. I didn't think about that when I was doing a part of speech thing. Yeah, that's interesting. I'll think about that.
Why did you remove the Enron specific phrases, the one that has to do with their work, which obviously hierarchy?
Yeah, I think it absolutely does. I think there would be Enron phrases that would tell you a lot. It's just that they wouldn't tell me much. Like, I don't particularly care much about Enron itself. I care about corporate culture and hierarchy. So I'm looking for words that, you know, are as likely to appear at Enron as IBM as Google, right?
But you might have kept a marker for a corporation-related phrase because the way it relates to its neighbors might translate.
Yeah, maybe, yeah. That might be an interesting thing to go back and check on. All right, so then we piped this to 2 models. I'm only going to talk about one really today, which is the penalized logistic regression. So the idea here, logistic regression, if some of you I know are familiar with it, but the idea just being that you're going to predict a binary response. So if it's going up or it's staying down or at the same level. And penalized just means that we can handle collinearity really well. All right, so here's the stats that I will breeze over very quickly. All right, so if you look in the second row, this is just straight out of the paper, right? The deviance here is the amount of variance essentially in the model. And if you just give it senders, so like if I give you information on who sent the mail, you can explain quite a bit of information. So that's the reduction in deviance, and we'll go into the actual phrases here. If I give you the phrases in addition to who sent it, you get a drastic reduction. So down from 1628 to 224. The chi-square statistic is kind of off the map. All right, so the message here is that these phrases really do mean a lot, all right, and really do signal quite a bit. So here's the really fun part. The really fun part is what words, right? So if you look in the top right-hand corner, attach, right? These are upward phrases. So these are phrases that people say to their bosses. I attach the following, meaning that most documents flow up the chain. In the second, I wish I had a, in the second row here, I took. Oh yeah, thanks. So I took, usually followed by the liberty, right? Here's a couple of hedging phrases that we might, thought you would. I thought that we might do the following, or I thought you'd like to see this, hedging again. Let's see, looks fine. Good job, boss. Right? Here's one I can't explain yet. I don't know. That's a good question. There's noise in the data. I'm not sure.
There's a lot of shit going on. I couldn't finish the presentation.
Yeah, so Enron was a really like freewheeling. Yeah, I mean, cowboy culture, right? It's Texan. Yeah. So it looks fine. I left you a voicemail, right, because I couldn't get a hold of you. Let's see if there are any other ones here. So those are good. Yeah, I was surprised by please change too. No, I think it was please take a look.
Yeah,
Yeah.
please change as needed and send it forward, that kind of thing.
Yeah, maybe that could be true. I wonder if there's any good ones I have. Oh, driving, right? Right? I'm driving right now, but I was so, you're so important to me, and my job is so important that I'm sending you email anyway, right? So don't, All right, so here's the language that bosses send to their employees. Have you been? We'll look at have you been in detail pretty soon, because have you been is super interesting. I really like need in, which is usually followed by the next 5 minutes. Promotion and title. When we looked into that, that's actually like, you might have a shot at this promotion, so I'm dangling this over your head. Let's see. There's a bunch of, maybe some more informal language, like man, cool, right? You see some of this. Less commit, we will probably, this is something bosses say to their employees, right? We'll probably do the following, but this is probably not something I would say to my boss. And if you look, let's discuss, we'll look at that in detail too. All right. So after we kind of got all these phrases together, I pumped them through this software called Luke, which is the linguistic inquiry word count tool that's put out by Texas. And to see if the phrase is grouped into any categories. And they didn't, except for one category, which was cognitive, so the demonstration of thought. So showing that I'm actively thinking about stuff is something people don't do to their bosses, apparently. So it seems like people go to their bosses when they know the answer, not when they're working it out, right? Which makes sense.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
What is this P referred to?
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it refers to the chi-square statistic between the two groups. So
The groups are the number of.
yeah. So sorry. So these are upward and then lateral downward. So there's a significant difference between the stuff you say to your bosses and the stuff you say to those below you are at the same level. From the email text, yeah. This is the text, yeah. So let's get to the text because that's really fun. So weekend is an upward phrase, something people say to their bosses. Hi, Carol, my home number is the following. Weekends work fine, so give me a call anytime. Right? I work all the time, man. So just give me a call on the weekend, right? That's fine. As you might expect, sounds good is something that employees say to bosses. So sorry I haven't read my email in the past day. Too busy selling, but that sounds good. Right? So you can just clearly tell that this is somebody reporting to their boss. Right? Have you been is the top phrase used by bosses. Did Tim already send these documents for your review? If he did, have you been working with the group on them, or do you want to tell me about any problems? So have you been? Yeah, it does, right? Yeah. But the have you been is kind of stuck in there to kind of check on status, right? My personal favorite for have you been?
This occurs often enough.
Yeah. It occurs quite a bit. Kind of the softer version of have you been is I hope you. Aaron, I sent you a file a few days ago. I hope you could open it. All right. Like a lot of this stuff is really subtle. All right, so.
Just 1 second.
Yeah, sure.
Do you have any idea of the effect size? So the meta coefficient is nice, but what does it mean?
So the real effect size is in the explanation of deviance that I showed. So the effect size is like all the phrases together are a pretty dramatic reduction in deviance. It's not all the information though.
Actually, talk to me in terms of emails and numberings. Do you have an idea? I mean, you do chi-square statistics,
Yeah.
but so what are we looking at?
Yeah, each of these coefficients ups the probability of.
That's right. So that's right. So yeah, effectively we're saying that, have you been at 8.46, is 4 times more powerful than I hope you at 2.77. That doesn't answer your question, though, does it?
It's not, but I think you have actual numbers.
Yeah, I do. Yeah. Yeah, sure.
Maybe you're showing the number to us. Is the odds factor, if these words are present, changed by e to the?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, these are interpret this in terms of logistic regression.
E to the power 3 is already 20, so
Yeah.
8.4 is
Yeah. So log odds is improved 4 times. Yeah. Okay. So these are what are known as, they're called word trees. They're visualizations of phrases. I took these courtesy of Many Eyes, the online site. So employees do a lot of thanking. These are all from the employee to boss corpus. So thank you for your comments. Thank you for your prompt reply. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for the tickets. Thank you all for allowing me, right? Lots of ways of thanking. So thanking is a word that comes up a lot. Bosses, on the other hand, do a lot of talking. So these are the words that come down the hierarchy that end in talk. So I'd like to talk. I would like to talk. And we need a meeting to talk. We need to talk. Have you had a chance to talk? I want to talk. Could you please talk? Let's talk, right? Just lots and lots of uses of the word talk, right? And if you factor in discuss or chat, you just see a lot of talk, which kind of makes sense, right? I mean, one of the things that managers do is coordinated activity among a bunch of people, and the way they do that is by talking with folks to make sure they've got all the right information. Okay. So I made this data set available. So if you're interested, a few of you might be, you can go to this URL and download all of the phrases and their beta coefficients so you can see what stuff is indicative and explore it on your own. The idea being that I thought it would be cool if there was some kind of reusable dictionary. I made use of an open source data set. I thought it would be nice to contribute back with an open source data set of my own. All right.
Does that include the dyadic?
Yeah, it does. So the coefficients being positive or negative in.
But lost is the triadic one, is that?
Yeah, triadic is going. Yeah, in this data set. Yeah. All right. I'm going to move on to gossip, unless there's any questions on hierarchy? Okay. Oh, yeah, I should say. So, the kind of end takeaway point from this part of the work is that, phrases are a reliable indicator. They're not the whole story, but they're a reliable indicator of who's above us or who's below us in the hierarchy. So we definitely use certain phrases reliably to signal hierarchy. There's unexplained variance in all this stuff, of course, right? And so I think there could be really interesting things to look at, like misspellings. We didn't look at how long it took you to respond, so that's a great intuitive predictor that I threw away. So I know when my advisor sent me mail at Sunday, Sunday at 3 in the morning, I was right there on that, right? Right. Okay, so now we get to the juicy stuff. This is again on the Enron corpus, and I'm going to talk about gossip. And again, it's a computational approach. This is from a paper that was recently accepted for ICWSM, so I'll have a copy of it available pretty soon, and can point you to it if you want some more. So we're again looking at the Enron corpus, and we want to look at gossip. So it begs the question, why gossip? So I'm totally fascinated by gossip, but in the kind of general, I think in general it has a negative connotation, right? I mean, right? If I said gossip, it means something negative, right, to most of you? It means like backbiting neighbors, trading stuff over the fence, right? It can also just be like the healthy trading of social information. So, did you hear that Moore got that new grant? That's really cool, right? I tell this to somebody else, right? And now they know something about the funding landscape in research, right? And that might serve to, it's not immediately useful. It's not information seeking. I didn't ask you what Moore's up to, or, what's the current funding landscape. But maybe at some point in the future, that information could be really useful to me. So there are certain scholars that actually say, I mean, different people have measured this different ways, but most studies show that we spend a pretty significant amount of our time talking about one another, right? Without any kind of goal-directed, endpoint. Robin Dunbar, who's famous for the Dunbar number, right? You guys all know the Dunbar number, right? As part of the thesis of that book, from where the Dunbar number comes from, is that gossip was the reason we invented language at all, right? Is so that we could trade stories about each other. I really like this picture. So Presentation of Self in Everyday Life by Irving Goffman has a great story about the dumbwaiter. So that's there in the background. The dumbwaiter actually was invented so that the masters of the house could keep their gossip safe from the servants. Right? So what's interesting here is it's just a nice story that whole technologies have actually just sprung up to support the practice of gossip or safeguarding gossip. All right, so again, we're going to take a computational approach. So we're going to define gossip as the following: using somebody's name in an email message in the body, but not including them as a recipient on the message. So, right, I might send a message to Sarita and mention Moore in it, but not CC Moore. So that's what we're going to term as gossip. So we're going to look through the corpus. It's not the most inclusive definition. It leaves out other forms of gossip, institutional gossip. This is more like, gossip where you're not, where the person, that targets a person when that person's not present.
It just leaves out initialisms too, so kind of.
It leaves out initialisms too. So if I just said
MD.
M, yeah, that's right. Yeah, we did our best to handle, but it would leave out initialisms. So if you were trying to cover it up by initializing somebody's names, we would miss it. Yeah.
I don't know if it just would count as gossip. I would include like the middle management requesting something that their employees that upper management requested. Like if Joe's boss is Bob, so sending an email saying Bob wants this done, can we get this done?
It would. It would catch some of that stuff too. So kind of requests for information or something. I think it's fair to if it's a call to action, I think we're probably including messages we shouldn't be including. But if it's like a message like you're saying, Bob would like the following for his report, can you get that to me sometime next week, right? I have traded information with you about Bob's current state, right? About what Bob is working on.
So how would
Yeah.
I was told, for instance?
What's that?
I start with I was told something.
Yeah.
So
Actually, I was told. We'll look at some of the phrases that are indicative of gossip. Have you heard? Just in case.
so you also would count that kind of phrase.
Oh, no. You have to use somebody's name. So if you don't refer to a proper name in the message, we're going to miss it. So we're kind of missing out on some stuff, but it's within the reach of current natural language processing techniques. So that's kind of why we are where we are. All right. So here's an example. Cover your eyes if you don't like curse words. So this person is just passing a ton of gossip, right? This is a workplace email, by the way. So Kyle's an arrogant asshole. Susan told me that on Saturday she had it out with him, doesn't want him around. Also, apparently he's treating Dana right? Just thought that this was an interesting development, right? So this is telling you, look, if you are alone in the hallway with Kyle, run, right? Because he's, right.
Maybe you're going to get to this, but how does this tie into your earlier work on hierarchy? Is gossip mostly on the same level?
Man, I did not plant you, I swear. 2 slides away. All All right, so let's talk about the technical approach just briefly. So we're using a technique, I know some of you have from a CS background know what I'm talking about, others may not. So there's an approach in machine learning, natural language processing called named entity recognition. It operates automatically. You give it some text and it annotates entities that it sees in there. And one of those entities is proper names. So it would catch Eric Gilbert as a proper name or Eric as a proper name. I don't know, I'm not so sure. I might get in trouble for saying it's a solved problem, but it certainly has come a long way in the NLP community. And so we downloaded this from the Stanford NLP toolkit. You can go and check it out. We also used a nickname database. So let's say that, so we noticed that this was a problem, right? That people, when they're given corporate email addresses, are often given corporate email addresses to their full and proper name. So Stephen Crane, but they never go by Stephen in the text, Steve, right? So we needed a nickname database. So anytime like if we saw Steve and we didn't see Steve on anywhere in the recipient list or on the from, we checked a nickname database to say, okay, let's normalize Steve into Stephen and check all of the things that could possibly be Steve and see if we can find that. So we did handle nicknames, but not initialisms. All right. So the interesting whole statistic is that about 20% of all of the Enron corpus falls into this category of gossip. All right. And let's talk, so now I get to your point. How does it vary by a bunch of different parameters? So how does it vary by rank? So along the left is rank, where 6 is highest, so 6 is CEOs, 5 is VPs. And that's the percentage of gossip in that category. It's kind of the same, right? With the exception of the lawyers, number 4. So 4 is the lawyers. They're probably like suing people, right? So they're talking about them, right? But you see kind of an across the board, it's not that variable, which means that it doesn't really matter what your rank is, you gossip. Quite just about the same.
Well, and lawyers would often be handling complaints. Or
That's right. That's right. So they get their privy.
That Jane said this and he harassed her.
That's right. That's right. That's exactly right. So they're kind of in the thick of it, right? Yeah.
It is most gossip within the same rank.
Yeah. All right. So actually, that number at the edge is supposed to be 80. My student told me that. I messed that up.
That's 80 people?
That's 80 messages. So I think, I think that's 80 messages. That's right. Yeah. So this is within rank difference. So this is the distribution as gossip is flowing through the organization. 0 meaning that with a very high likelihood you are gossiping with your peers. Right? So you don't gossip across ranks or across social class. You do a little bit here and there.
Looks to me like the rank of that bar is 6,050 to some of all the
It could, well, I don't know about the sum, but
But if this
quite a bit, though.
it's 80, so
Yeah, it's 80. I could pull it out of the paper. Hello?
20% of 150,000.
Yeah, no, yeah, I've got to have the number wrong for some reason. I'll check it out. I'm not sure exactly what it is. All right, so this is kind of a more detailed look at how it flows through the organization. So remember, the top is CEOs, then going down. And so on the left-hand side, you've got 5, which is the VPs, talking quite a bit to 0, which is the employees. So most of the gossip that's going down is going from executives to their admins, right? And this is kind of an interesting phenomenon. I mean, when you look, thinking back to the hierarchy stuff, right? Admins often occupy this very informal power role in organizations, right? They're not on the org chart. They're not super powerful, but they control access to rooms. They yeah, and they barter access to resources, right? So that's interesting. On the top, the upward stuff is almost all going from VPs to CEOs, and otherwise not really. We're not seeing much traffic that way. Yeah.
Do you have any analysis on what levels are gossiping about which levels? So
I don't have it on.
Gossip about people who are your superiors or your subordinates?
Yeah. So we tried this. So the tricky part is when you usually use somebody's first name. So we use Kyle, right? Yeah, so I can't tell which Kyle. So if Kyle is unique, I could assume that it's maybe that guy, but it's kind of hard to tell just from the text to uniquely identify their position. We tried really, really hard to get that done because it is really interesting, right? Like, who's the target of the gossip? Probably, I mean, you would assume my intuition there is that it's the powerful people. So I ran this software on my own email, like by an order of magnitude. So So over a 10-year period, who would you guess is my most gossiped about person over the last 10 years? My advisor. Absolutely. Don't tell her that one. So, I mean, that's my intuition there, is that people who have power over us, we trade stories about them. Yeah.
By number of messages?
Yeah, that's by number of messages. So I think this is proportion.
Oh, what's it?
The widths are proportions. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you have the same thing for just total traction messages that are along the
I don't. Yeah, I might have a normalized statistic somewhere, but not in this talk. Yeah, Charlie.
Do you apply sentiment analysis instead of saying nice things and bad things?
Oh man, it's coming. It's coming. I did not plant these people. So that's 2 slides away. So I thought this statistic was really revealing. Some folks at CMU manually labeled 10,000 messages in the nrun corpus for another project as to whether they were personal or business, right? Serious or just social, right? And then we took that corpus and ran our little gossip thing over it. It turns out that people gossip just as much when they're talking about personal matters as they are when they're talking about business stuff.
Did you do a sanity check by looking at a couple dozen of those to see that they were really business gossip?
Yeah, we did. They looked like business gossip to us. Yeah, we did.
Did you find romantic affairs and
I think you just nailed my next grant proposal. Yeah. So we ran the text from the gossip messages through, commercially available sentiment engines. So this will tell you if the text from the entire email is positive, negative, or neutral. So it's true, gossip is kind of nasty. It's 3 times more likely, if you're just looking at positive or negative, there's 3 times more negative gossip than positive gossip. All right, so these are messages like the arrogant guy, Kyle, who is treating everybody. But, like half of the messages kind of fall into a neutral class, which just means that the algorithm wasn't able to determine the polarity.
Look, right?
What's that?
This is with look.
This is with Luke, yeah, I think, yeah.
So if you look at the neutrals, were they really polar fields?
I took a look at some of the neutrals. If I had my student here, she did most of this work, so I'm actually not sure. She looked at more of them than I did, but I looked at a few. And I think the neutrals were pretty neutral, right? I mean, there are limitations to this kind of software approach to messages, but they seem...
Well, but if the neutrals were really neutral, then the software
Yeah.
is behaving okay.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely saw some noise in there too, though. Yeah.
Especially when I see this, I'm thinking about knowledge sharing, how we tend to ask other people, especially our peers, like who has the knowledge in organization.
Yep.
So the way you define gossip may be a lot like, okay, I don't know this. Did you? I'm going to tend to ask my peer, not my boss, who has the knowledge. And
Yeah.
also the same for CEOs. They may tell you, okay, talk to this person. So
Yeah.
basically, this will be someone else. It just may not be gossip. Have you?
Well, I mean,
any
I think it's fair to call, as long as if it's goal directed, then it's probably not gossip. But if I happen to tell you in a conversation that this other person is really knowledgeable about, have you heard, Sarita's really, sorry to pick on you, Sarita, but Sarita knows a lot about social media. And, a month later, you're like, oh, I really need somebody who knows a lot about social media, right? And Sarita comes to mind, right? That was just kind of informal social trading of information.
But you've done this way, you define gossip broadly, so
Yeah, so I would catch the goal-directed stuff too. Yeah, so I would catch the goal-directed stuff too. So that's kind of a limitation of the totally wholly computational approach. Okay, so this is a look at how many recipients gossip email receive. So in the blue you've got non-gossip mail, and in the red you've got gossip mail. This graphic just shows that if it's gossip, it's more likely to be targeted to a smaller audience, which is kind of what you would assume. Like if I'm going to talk about somebody, I don't want everyone else around. Yeah. I agree. So one of the most used phrases in a gossip message is "in case you." Right. So this is the information. So that when we looked at the phrase analysis, this is one of the top ones to pop out. Right. So this isn't like information you need right now. It's just in case you haven't heard, or in case you don't have this, or in case you need that, right? So, my takeaway slide here is, we gossip a lot. It's actually seems to be quite a bit of the corpus. It doesn't seem to matter what the rank is. We do it mostly with our peers. We do it even when we're working to share information and be mean. We do it with small audiences, and we do it just in case, right? So in case you need something in the future.